What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. We are less than 2 weeks away from the 2025 NFL Draft. And after all the moving and all the shaking that bad man Adam Peters has done over the course of the 2025 offseason, we are left with just 5 picks heading into draft weekend. And with that being said, a lot of people around the Washington community are expecting us to trade back from pick 29. And me over here bleeding B&G, I don't necessarily think that that's the case. Because first, you need a dance partner. You need somebody to tango with. And number two, this draft class doesn't scream a bunch of uber elite prospects that teams are going to be calling up and trading up for. So with today's episode, we're going to be looking at our favorite, Bleeding B&G's favorite 5 prospects if our Washington Commanders are going to be staying at pick 29 and making a selection at the back part of the first round. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Before we look at some actual draft prospects, I wanted to take some time and look at the draft trends of Adam Peters. So I know he's only been here for 1 year, so we have a small sample size, but we can also look at some of the trends of the front offices that he was a part of when he was in New England with the Patriots and San Francisco with the 49ers as well as his 2024 performance over draft weekend to see kind of where his thoughts are aligning and where some prospects might fit his philosophies and his ideologies of some sort. So if you look at some of Adam Peters' draft trends, you'll look and see that he is not afraid to go best player available, and that was evident with the selection of Johnny Newton last year. A lot of people weren't expecting defensive tackle to be selected with the second round, our second pick in the 2024 draft. That was not on a lot of Washington Commander fans' bingo cards, with Daron Payne and John Allen both set to make over $20 million. But it was deemed that Johnny Newton was the steal of the draft last year, with him falling out of the first round at Adam Peters pounced. Adam Peters pounced, making him the second pick in our draft class and with our second round pick. So that showed that he wasn't afraid to go best player available, despite what the outsiders may think the positional needs might be. Another draft trend that sticks out in my mind is that he is looking for athletic freaks. He's looking for some athletic prospects. The 2024 draft class for the Washington Commanders, they had an average RAS score, which is a raw athletic score, of 9.427. It was the highest raw athletic score of any of the NFL teams for the 2024 NFL Draft. And that doesn't include the likes of undrafted free agents like Tyler Owens, who had a 10.0 unanimous perfect raw athletic score as well. So he is looking for those athletic freaks a part of his draft class. And another thing that sticks out in my mind, and one of those metrics that are tested with the raw athletic scores, is the 20-yard short shuttle. Adam Peters loves him a 20-yard short shuttle. He loves him a guy that can run a quick 20-yard short shuttle. That's evident with the selections of Luke McCaffrey last year, who ran a 4.02, who was the top wide receiver in the 20-yard short shuttle time. And then Mikey Sammerstill, who ran a 4.01, who was the second fastest cornerback measured in the short shuttle time over the course of the 2024 draft prospects. So those are some of the trends that are standing out. Let me tell you another one that sticks out in my mind when I've looked at, Adam Peters' draft history, is he is not afraid to draft older prospects. Speaking of older prospects, the golden boy right there, number 5, he came out as a 23-year-old fifth-year senior. Mikey Sammerstill was a fifth-year senior last year. Don Hampton was a fifth-year senior last year. So that tells me that Adam Peters is looking to win right now. He's looking for some instant contributors, and that can work out both ways. Jaden Daniels and Mikey Sammerstill were immediate impact players, and I would argue 2 of the 10 most important Washington Commanders over the course of the 2024 season. But a guy like Dom Hampton rarely saw the field. I don't even know if Dom Hampton was active for more than about 3 or 4 games. So that can work out either which way. I know sometimes with those older prospects, they tend to be closer to their athletic ceiling, and that may correlate to with why they're testing so high with that raw athletic score number. But that was just a draft trend that stuck out in my mind based off of his selections last year, that he's not afraid to draft older prospects. And then we keep hearing Adam Peters as well as Dan Quinn. I think you might have even heard Lance Newmark talk about these commander tags, these guys that they gave commander tags last year, essentially like gold hat type players. And those were like the players that fit the characteristics and had the personality traits that they were looking for the most. And I think Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, while they haven't really gave us, they haven't lined it out and gave us the full-fledged definition of what a commander tag or what they're looking for a player to earn a commander tag, they've kind of given us bits and pieces of it. They said like guys that are working hard, guys that love football, guys that, love being around their team, guys that are family oriented, and guys that, have a high motor and that it shows on tape. So these are guys that, are going to be your team captains. Another trend, Adam Peters loves to draft him a team captain. So he loves him a leader in the room. He loves him a leader in the room. And the last thing that really stuck out into my mind when I was looking over Adam Peters' draft history is that he loves him a multi-year contributor. He doesn't really like these flash in the pan guys that have 1 year of success and blow up the college scene coming out of nowhere. He loves a guy that's put in the work and has been on the college scene and producing for a while, whether that be 2, 3 years, sometimes even 4 years. He loves him a multi-year contributor, somebody that has had sustained production in college and, something that he hopes can translate into the NFL. So those are the draft trends that stuck out in my mind over, me just analyzing Adam Peters' draft history with his time with the 49ers, the Commanders, and the Patriots. And then when you look at what is deemed to be our biggest needs, I would say that our biggest needs going into draft weekend in this order would be edge, defensive back, whether that be cornerback or safety, because I think we can improve in both, wide receiver, and offensive line. So when we're going to be looking at our 5 favorite prospects to be selected at pick 29, we're going to start with the edge position, a position that is so deep, pause, no diddy, so deep, uber deep in the 2025 draft class. So without further ado, let's look at some edge prospects that might be favored to be selected at pick 29 for our beloved. So when you're talking about the edge position, Adam Peters kind of gave you a glimmer of what he's looking for when he's thinking about his ideal edge in any draft. He says, and he gave you a look at it when he talked at the combine, and this was a tweet from Sam 48 where he quoted Adam Peters. It says, GM Adam Peters and what he looks for in an edge rusher. He said, ideally 6'5", 36-inch arms, a 1.3 second 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash, and a slew of intangibles. And then he said, to be really good in this league, I think you have to have both speed and power. I'm here to let you know right now, Adam Peters is looking for a goddamn monster. Adam Peters is looking for an edge that was created in a goddamn lab. And I don't know if he was using hyperbole and exaggerating, but there ain't a lot of edges in NFL history that fit or check off every single one of these boxes. Adam Peters is looking for Zeus to play defensive end. Like he's looking for Zeus to play D end. And I'm not necessarily sure that anybody in NFL history, I'm not even sure Lawrence Taylor can come to meet, Adam Peters' requirements for, his ideal edge defender. But there are some good edges that I think can be instant contributors to the Washington Commanders in 2025. So with that being said, we're going to look at 2 prospects at the edge position that I think can be, big time contributors and guys that I think can ultimately, be of, Adam Peters' liking. And I think all 5 of these guys that I'm going to be naming in today's video, I think all have realistic chances of being selected at pick 29. Now, Can they go a couple of picks before 29? Absolutely. That's just the unpredictability of the draft. Can they go after 29? Absolutely. But after scouring mock drafts and doing my own research, these are, the 5 prospects that we talk about in today's video are guys that all have, I believe, realistic chances of being there at pick 29 when we select at the back part of the first round. So the first edge that I'm going to be talking about is a name that's super popular in the Washington Commander community, and that's defensive end, edge rusher, Donovan Ezaraku, defensive end out of Boston College. Now, pull up his raw athletic scoring numbers, because while raw athletic scoring isn't the end all be all, right? All these tested numbers don't mean that they're going to correlate into, an excellent football player. But it kind of happens more often than not. And if you guys aren't familiar with RAS and what RAS is, it's the raw athletic scoring metric, where rather than, just putting a whole bunch of numbers on a piece of paper, they actually add context to the level of the player's athleticism due to, their size, their weight, and things like that. So, a 350-pound defensive tackle running a 5-flat 40 might be more impressive than a 190-pound receiver running a 4.3, even though everybody's going to be marveling about that 4.3 flat at the end of the combine. So that's what raw athletic scoring is. And as I mentioned when I talked about Adam Peters' draft trends, raw athletic scoring, that RAS score seems to be important to old buddy, old pal, Adam Peters. And Donovan Ezaraku is going to be the first guy that we talked about. So I'll put up his RAS number so you can look at, the numbers while we're talking about it on the screen. So he had a 7.98 official RAS score, but he didn't have any speed score. So he didn't have a 10-yard split, he didn't have a 20-yard split, or he didn't have a 40-yard dash. And that's because he didn't participate in any of those speed scores over the course of the off season. But a 7.98, even though it'll be on the low end based off of, the prospects that Adam Peters selected during the 2024 draft, it's still a very impressive score. You see that it said that it ranked him 380th over the course of about 1,900 defensive ends that they have tracked in their database. So a 7.98 isn't anything to scoff at. And if you look here, the lowest portion of his raw athletic scoring was his size. He's a little bit undersized as an edge defender at 6'2", a little under 250 pounds, but he does possess 34-inch arms. While they aren't the 36-inch arms that, Adam Peters is looking for. I told you, he's looking for a goddamn monster. Adam Peters wants Zion Williamson to play DN, and I ain't mad at him. But, 34-inch arms aren't anything to scoff at either. If you look at his scoring from the combine for the drills that he did do, he had a pretty impressive vertical jump of almost 36 inches with a broad of, 9 feet and 11 inches. All of those tend to correlate to a pretty decent 40 time. So I was kind of surprised to see that he didn't, run at his pro day at least, and wanted to stand on his explosion numbers from the combine. But this is a guy that is a tremendous athlete. That short shuttle time, I told you, Adam Peters love him a short shuttle. That 4.18 placed him at a 9.66. So he's one of the top all time at the defensive end edge position with that short shuttle time. And he had a 3-cone of 6.94, which was elite as well. So his overall agility scores are elite. And I think that he might have tested better with the overall raw athletic scoring number if he performed those speed drills. He had, a number on his 40-yard dash, his 10-yard split, and his 20-yard split, because I think he would have done well in those drills as well. So let's talk about Donovan Ezaraku as a player. This is a guy that screams production. He had 16.5 sacks last season. He had 7.5 sacks in 2022. He's a 4-year senior. So he has years of production. He's a guy that has production, but he isn't necessarily an older prospect, because at the time of the draft, he'll be only 21 years old. He'll turn 22 in September. So his rookie season will be his age 22 season. And as I mentioned, he is a tad bit undersized at 6'2", 250 pounds, but he gives a lot of effort in the run game. I'm super impressed with his motor. And just looking at his tape, I don't see how Donovan Ezereku doesn't scream commander tag. I don't see how Adam Peters, Dan Quinn can look at his film and not give him that commander tag label. He's a guy that, while he isn't, this supreme edge setter, the supreme run defender, that's not what he's going to be drafted for. 16 and a half sacks. That's what he does. He's a pass rush specialist. He's a pass rushing connoisseur, but he does give a lot of effort in the run game. He does run down players on the backside. The only concern I have about Donovan Ezereku is going against, teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, who have shown that they're not scared to run at players. They've run at Micah Parsons, who is an elite defensive end. And speaking of Micah Parsons, I'm not going to mention Abdul Carter or Mike Green in this video, because I don't think that either of those guys are going to be available for Washington to select at pick 29. Shit, I know Abdul Carter isn't going to be available. This is a guy that is a consensus top 3 pick. And then despite Mike Green getting his Micah Diddy on, and, the freaky allegations that has been, around his name over the course of his college career, I think that he's a very talented blue chip prospect as well. I think he's the second best edge in this class, and I think that he's going to be drafted in the first half of the first round, making it so Washington is unable to select him. And also, I don't think that he fits the commander tag with those, allegations that are swirling around his name for the last couple of years. So getting back to Donovan Ezereku, though, those agility numbers, they pop out to me, and I know they pop out to Adam Peters as well, because it matches his tape. This is a guy that shows exceptional bend around the corner. This is a guy that's able to run the arc, and he whipped defensive tackles in the ACC offensive tackles in the ACC all year, to be quite honest with you. This is a guy, 16 and a half sacks. I think that was second in the entire nation, and I think the number one guy had 17. So the number one guy was Mike Green with 17. So he beat Donovan Ezereku out by a half of a sack. And yeah, Donovan Ezereku is a really good prospect. If the Baltimore Ravens don't select him with the 27th pick, and Baltimore, they're known for drafting good defensive players, and I think that Donovan Ezereku is a good defensive player, and it will validate my thought that he's going to be an instant contributor in this league if Baltimore selects them. But if they don't, and he's still on the board at pick 29, unless some other guys that I mentioned on this video today are still on the board as well, we should be high-stepping. We should be sprinting to the podium to select Donovan Ezereku with pick 29. This is a popular pick amongst the Washington community, and I'm going to be quite honest with you. I think of all the players that I mentioned in today's episode, I think Donovan Ezereku has the potential of going the earliest. I could see him going in the early 20s. Because you cannot deny that production. And then, he has the testing numbers to match. Teams that are looking for, a designated pass rusher early in his career can be a team that, Donovan Ezereku piques their interest of things of that nature. So Donovan Ezereku is the first prospect that we're going to mention out of the 5 guys that we like if we stay at pick 29. And now let's move on to another edge. My comp for Donovan Ezereku, I know a lot of people are screaming out Nick Bonito, which I get, but I think I don't know. I think he can be more of an instant contributor. It took a couple of years for Nick Bonito to kind of warm up and become the Nick Bonito that he is today. I see Elvis Dumervil when I watch Donovan Ezereku. This is another small edge. Donovan isn't as small as Elvis Dumervil. Elvis Dumervil was damn near my height, and I'm not slicing it. He was really like 5'11". But his ability to turn the corner, his ability to beat edges, he was beating offensive tackles that were, 8 and 9 inches bigger and taller than him, just due to his, ability to use leverage and to use bend when rushing the passer. So, that's my little rundown on Donovan Ezereku. Now let's look at another edge that I think can pique Adam Peters and Dan Quinn's interest at pick 29, and that's Mykel Williams. Defensive end, edge rusher out of the University of Georgia. And my philosophy. You know what I've been saying. I've adapted the Philadelphia Eagles philosophy of you cannot go wrong drafting Georgia defensive front seven players. You cannot go wrong drafting Georgia defensive front seven players. We see the success of Jalen Carter. We see the success of Nolan Smith. They just producing factories over there where the defensive side of the ball is, concerned. And, I told you, while Adam Peters is looking for a goddamn monster and it's pretty unrealistic, Mykel Williams is pretty close to fitting the bill. Mykel Williams is pretty close to fitting the bill. And I actually made a tweet in February when I said that I know that it might not be possible because this is a guy that around February, he was still around, the top 15s when I was scouring, going in, the top 15 picks. Mykel Williams was a top 5 projected pick going into the 2024 college football season. And even around February when I made this tweet where I said that I think he's the most perfect prospect for the Washington Commanders in the entire draft. While he might not have the pass rush juice that a guy like Mike Green and the twitchiness that a guy like Abdul Carter has, I think that he's the most all around and overall the most complete edge in the 2025 class. And like I said, he doesn't fit the Monstars build that Adam Peters is looking for, but he's damn close. He didn't get a chance to qualify for a raw athletic score number due to the fact that he didn't do any agility testing. But if you look at his sheer size, 6'5", 260 pounds at the combine. I think he was closer to 270 at his pro day. Then he ran a 4.77, which a lot of people turned their nose up. When have we gotten to the days where we scoffed at a guy 6'5", 270 pounds running a sub 4.8? Some of these underwear Olympics have spoiled us. Would I have wanted him to run faster? Absolutely. But that is nothing to scoff at. You see that his speed score still ended up being great with his 20-yard split and his 10-yard split being elite. And his 10-yard split is damn impressive. At a 1.61 10-yard split at 6'5", damn near 270 pounds. His arm length is a little longer than Donovan Ezereku as well, at closer to 34.5 inches. And he has huge hands as well at 10.25 inches. Mykel Williams is built like a goddamn monster. He's that monster that Adam Peters is looking for. He's that monster that Adam Peters is looking for. And while, I said that he was mentioned as projected to be in a top 5 pick going into the 2024 season, I said that, he was projected just as before the pre-combine as being a top 15 pick. The reason that he might be still available at pick 29 isn't due to a lack of production. I promise you. Mykel Williams' story needs a lot of context. And guess what? That's what you got Bleeding BNG for. That's what you have Bleeding BNG for. Because this is a guy at 260 pounds. He is turning 21 years old in June. When whatever team, when Mykel Williams gets selected next week, he will be 20 years old with those type of dimensions. He was a top 5 player going into the year. And while he did lack some production with 5 sacks, he damn near played on one leg for the entire year. He got hurt in the first game of the season. And played through it. And this is one of the biggest reasons why I think that he screams a commander tag type player as well. Player that fought adversity, played through injury, and still was willing to go out there and put his body on the line for his team. Tell me that's not a commander. Playing through those injuries. And even in 2024, on a peg leg, Mykel Williams showed flashes of dominance. See the Texas game, i.e. the Texas game, where he was in Quinn Ewers' lap all goddamn night. Playing on one leg, hobbling in between plays. I'm going to say it right now, and it might be a hot take, it might be hyperbole, but guess what? We really mean what we say over here at Bleeding BNG. That's why you come over here for the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis on your Washington Commanders. A 100% healthy Mykel Williams is giving Abdul Carter a run for his money as the best edge defender in the 2025 NFL Draft. And I have no reason not to believe that he's going to come into the 2025 season 100% healthy. Boy, 20. He healed fast. He ain't getting to his 30s like me. After a long off season where he's still producing a sub 4.8 running on a peg leg that ain't even 100%, if he ever gets back to 100% health, which I have no reason to believe that he can't, oh, Michael Williams is going to be a demon in the NFL. You heard it here first over here at Bleeding B&G. My player comp for all Michael Williams is Alden Smith. And if you think about Alden Smith pre-crack, pre the drugs, pre him going Tyrone Biggums on us, going crazy, Alden Smith was on track for a first ballot Hall of Fame resume. Go look at the numbers if you think I'm lying. Almost 20 sacks in year 2. Following that up with like 15 and a half sacks. So if Michael Williams stay away from them crazy pills, oh, he will be a steal. He will be a steal of a pick if he's still available at pick 29. And I'm going to go out on the limb and say this as well. Michael Williams is going to be a better Georgia defender in the NFL, better than his teammate who's projected to go higher in him in Jalon Walker. Michael Williams is going to be a better pro than Jalon Walker. So those are the two edges that I would love, and I think we have a realistic shot of selecting at pick 29. Now let's look at some DBs. Let's get into some DBs. Now, I don't want to bury the lead, but spoiler alert. The DBs are the last position group that we're going to be talking about in this video. So yes, I do think if we stay at pick 29, we're ultimately going to be selecting an edge defender or a defensive back, whether that be a cornerback or a safety. While I think we can improve at the running back room, I think we can improve at the wide receiver room, I think we can improve in the offensive line. I think we're going to use those day 2 and day 3 picks to supplement those position groups. But enough of that. Let's get into the DBs. The first DB that I want to talk about that I think can be favored, or that I believe is favored, or one of the favorites to be selected at pick 29 is safety Nick Emmanwori out of the University of South Carolina. If you read the athletic scorecard that's on the screen, it says that Nick Emmanwori scored a perfect 10 for his raw athletic scoring. This ranked number 2 out of 1,086 strong safeties from 1987 to 2025. Do you guys know he was a 10, so he was tied. Do you guys know the only other safety that Nick Emmanwori was tied with? The guy that's holding number 1 for the strong safety position as far as RAS scores? It's Jeremy Chin, former Washington Commander, a guy that I was a big advocate for re-signing in the 2025 free agency period, but ultimately he went to the Oakland Raiders, the Vegas Raiders, excuse me. And with that being said, we now have a hole on our roster for a big safety. The Will Harris signing is cool. I think he's a solid player. But over here at Bleeder B&G, I've been preaching. One of the staples for a Dan Quinn defense is huge safeties. Whether that be Jeremy Chin that we just mentioned, J-Ron Curse, and what he was doing with the Dallas Cowboys, resurrecting his career under Dan Quinn, or a guy like Cam Chancellor, who put together damn near a Hall of Fame career, patrolling that back. The back end of the Legion of Boom when Dan Quinn was in his early years as a defensive coordinator and a defensive mind in this league. So I believe that Dan Quinn, a staple of it, he needs a big safety. Now, the likes of Jeremy Chin, J-Ron Curse, and Cam Chancellor, those guys are all box safeties in every sense of the word. They're goddamn mini linebackers. These are guys that can contribute to the run game as well as play the pass. And while I don't think that Nick Emmanwori is that type of safety, yes, he has similar dimensions. If you look at his raw athletic scoring at 6'3", 220 pounds, this is a guy with a 4.3 840. I know Adam Peters probably catches a boner when he looks at Nick Emmanwori's raw athletic scorecard. I know he probably catches a boner when he looks at Nick Emenworth's raw athletic scorecard and sees this perfect 10. If you look at his scoring, 6'3", 220 pounds, 20 reps of 225 with the bench, a 43-inch vertical, explosiveness. I think that would set a combine record for the safeties with an 11.6 broad jump, as well as a 1.53 10-yard split, 20-yard, 10-yard split, and a sub 4.4 40-yard dash. Nick Emenworth is that freak athlete that Adam Peters is looking for. I told you how the raw athletic score means a lot to him, evident in his draft history. And we have a need for safety. I think that, we downgraded at the safety position since, the end of the 2024 season. I think Will Harris is a downgrade over Jeremy Chin. And like I said, I don't think that they're necessary. I don't think that Nick Emenworth, if he was drafted for the Commanders or to the Commanders, I don't think that he's a direct Jeremy Chin replacement, because I honestly think that Nick Emenworth's best role in the NFL might end up being at free safety. Now, he does have all the dimensions of playing that strong safety. You want that extra 6'3", 220 pounds in the box, stuffing run lanes and things of that nature. But when you look at his film, and a lot of people are lower on Nick Emenworth, and the reason that, this goddamn freak might be available at the back half of the first round is that he isn't the best tackler. He doesn't diagnose plays the quickest. And that's something that you don't necessarily have to have instantaneously if you play in a free safety position, roaming in the backfield 20 yards away from the line of scrimmage, 20 yards away from the ball. Because I'm going to tell you one thing that he does have is that even if he has those late reads and those late recognitions to runs and things of that nature, he got the speed to get there in a hurry. He got the speed to get there in a hurry, and he got the size to lay the lumber. He is not your traditional box safety. Can he play it? Absolutely. Absolutely, but I think that he's going to have to take some coaching to get his eyes right and get his eyes in the, his eyes in the right place when he's in the box, in that front seven, playing those rundowns and things of that nature. But this is a guy that I think that when he reaches his ceiling in the NFL, he's going to be a guy that at 6'3", 220 pounds essentially takes away the third level of the defense, patrolling over the middle. He can play in a high post. He can play in a split safety look, or he can play in the box. So he's screaming that positional versatility that I know that term burned us with, Ron Rivera, preaching it week in and week out. But guess what? Dan Quinn is showing you that he's an advocate for positional versatility as well. We've heard him talk about how, football is getting positionless, how he's looked at basketball film to kind of see how he can line up positionless players to get the best out of their ability and things of that nature. And to put the cherry on top, Nick Emenworth was a team captain for the South Carolina Gamecocks during the 2024 season. So, he might be screaming a commander tag player as well. Because, even with his mistakes in the run game, I don't ever think that it's due to a lack of effort. Like I said, he has poor eyes in the run game as well, especially when he's closer to the line of scrimmage. A lot of those things can be coached up. And if we have as much faith in the coaching staff as I believe a lot of us do, Joe Witt Jr. can coach that up with Nick Emenworth. And I'm telling you, all you got to do is get his eyes right. You know how Carlos Rogers went from getting LASIK surgery and he went from ass juice to an all-pro corner? If you can coach Nick Emenworth up and get his eyes right, he can go from decent player to the best safety in the league. He has those type of physical traits. I think I might be the highest person on Nick Emenworth in the entire draft community. And I believe that Nick Emenworth or Mykel Williams would be my two favorites out of all the guys that I mentioned in today's video for pick 29. One thing that I found funny when I was doing my research for the video is that if you look at NFL Network and you look at Nick Emenworth's draft profile that was done by Lance Zierlein, his player comp is, let's get to it. His player comp is Jeremy Chin. And while I don't think that, they play necessarily alike, I think that, Nick Emenworth is more fluid in coverage than Jeremy Chin. I think that he's better in zone coverage than Jeremy Chin. I think he's better in man coverage than Jeremy Chin. I don't think that he's better defending the run than Jeremy Chin. I don't think he's a better box safety than Jeremy Chin, but you ultimately need that intimidating presence in the back end. Jeremy Chin was a reason a lot of those guys were scared to go over the middle in the back half of the season. We saw those crushing hits that he laid in Dallas. We saw the hits that he laid in Atlanta. Like Jeremy Chin was cracking skulls last year. And though his coverage wasn't great, but to be losing that, you want to supplement that with something. And I think that Nick Emmanwori is the perfect supplement. As I mentioned, I don't think that they play alike, but you can now get more versatile looks with, Quan Martin playing closer to the line of scrimmage, like he did in his rookie year and things of that nature. I actually think that Quan might be better running the alley, filling in run lanes than a guy like Nick Emmanwori. So they can essentially alternate roles depending on the matchup and depending on the gameplay at the safety position. You have Quan, who's around 6 feet, and then a guy like Nick Emmanwori. So they can fill roles simultaneously, but still give you that traditional big safety, average size safety type look. And these are all the reasons why I think that a guy like Nick Emmanwori would be an ideal prospect for Washington at 29. Now let's look at another defensive back. We're actually going to be looking at corners for our last two players that we're going to be talking about in today's video. And the first corner that I want to talk about is cornerback Azariah Thomas, who's a cornerback prospect from Florida State University. If you look at his raw athletic scorecard, he scored an 8.11. So that would be on the low end of what we drafted last year, but that's still a superior athlete as well. And a lot of that has to do with his size. He's a big bully corner at 6'1", 197 pounds. You see he has 10-inch hands with over 32-inch arms. That's tremendous. That's tremendous for a cornerback. He didn't do any vertical testing, but he had a 10-foot broad jump. And his 40, I ain't even gonna lie, it was a little slow. It was a little slow at 4.58, and that was a pro day 40. So we all know how them pro day 40s get. That wasn't laser, and while they call it official, it's really unofficial. We all know how those pro day 40s get. We remember those COVID 40s of 2021. But he has a 20-yard split of 2.66 and a 10-yard split of 1.55, which is actually pretty decent. And his short shuttle time wasn't bad for his size as well at 4.21. And the reason why I think that Azariah Thomas can be a fit for this Dan Quinn defense and can be a fit for the Washington Commanders is that this is a guy that's uber comfortable in man. Even though he's slow as molasses, he finds a way to get it done. He didn't participate in the combine after recovering from an injury, but Dan Quinn coach Richard Sherman, who wasn't a burner, and Trayvon Diggs, who ain't a burner either, to all-pro status. And each of these guys that I just mentioned have similar skill sets to Azariah Thomas. I think that, Richard Sherman and Trayvon Diggs' ball skills might be better than Azariah Thomas, with them being former wide receivers. But in terms of the way that they play cornerback position, a lot of pressing, a lot of press bail, a lot of, when in their man reps, a lot of, using the trail technique and things of that nature. Azariah Thomas reminds me of both of those guys as prospects. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be an all-pro future Hall of Famer like Richard Sherman, and I'm not saying that he's going to have a 2021 or a season like Trayvon Diggs' 2021 season. One thing that I do know is that he's going to compete, play in and play out, though. He's going to complete play in and play out. And one thing that I do think that we wanted to run more man than we did last year. I think that we had to run a lot of zone due to the ineptness that we had at the cornerback position, trying out Emmanuel Forbes and fucking Benjamin St. Juste. Like, we really trotted out those two as our top cornerbacks in week 1. What the hell was we thinking? I know high school cornerback duos better than Emmanuel Forbes and Benjamin St. Juste. But let's stick with the future. Let's stay talking with Azariah Thomas. And while he doesn't necessarily have the ball skills of those guys, he seems to just find a way to make plays on the ball. I think a lot of it has to do with his 32-inch arm length. Even though he's not the fastest guy, he just seems to stick to guys. Like I said, he's more comfortable than in man than zone, which is a little surprising for a slower corner. But He gives you the big bully capability and the athletic profile to be able to challenge number one wide receivers. This is a guy, he's strictly a boundary corner, so he gives you the ability to stick Mikey Sanders still back to that nickel cornerback position. And if Marshawn Lattimore's hamstring ever decides to come up from New Orleans and he regains form and becomes the CB1 that we traded for, I think Azariah Thomas is it's more than capable of covering CB2s wide receiver twos around the league. And last but not least, the last prospect that we're going to go in depth about today is another cornerback from down south, coming from the SEC this time, and that's cornerback Trey Amos, cornerback from Ole Miss. Is it Ole Miss University or is it the University of Mississippi? We're going to call it Ole Miss. But Trey Amos, he's a similar prospect in many ways, in my mind, to a guy like Azariah Thomas. This is a guy that's 6'1", 195, so they have similar, builds and things of that nature. Trey Amos's hand size is a little smaller, a little over 9 inches. His arm length is a little shorter, but still very good for a boundary cornerback at over 31 inches. You see his raw athletic score was an 8.85, damn near a 9, which fits a lot of the draft trends and a lot of things that Adam Peters is looking for. And you see the speed score was great. He actually surprised me with his 4.43. I didn't necessarily see that on tape, but the splits, the 20-yard and the 10-yard split back it up. And his explosion testing, specifically with the broad jump, backs it up as well. I like Trey Amos as a prospect as I've gotten to watch him more and more over the course of the draft process and things of that nature. This is a guy that I kind of written off because, I'm an Alabama fan, and Trey Amos was not good with Alabama in the 2023 season. He was a backup. He only started for one game, but then he transferred to Ole Miss and damn near took the SEC by storm with 13 pass breakups, 3 interceptions in 2024. So he has the ball production that Azariah Thomas necessarily doesn't. And he has the ball production that we know that, Dan Quinn and Joe Witt are yearning for, that they're looking for. He has that ball production and a couple of things that will put a tip in his cap for fitting, Adam Peters' draft trends is that he's an older prospect. He'll be 24 at the end of this year. He's kind of like on the same age timeline as a guy like Jaden Daniels. And I believe that while, they have similar builds, I think he's more fluid than a guy like Azariah Thomas. Azariah Thomas is a straight smash mouth, in-your-face bully corner. Think Brandon Browner. He's not as big as Brandon Browner. Brandon Browner was like a damn NBA point guard. He's like 6'4". But Azariah Thomas bullies guys at the line of scrimmage like he was Brandon Browner. Trey Amos is a little more fluid despite having similar builds. I think that he can play press. I think that he's better in man, and I think that the ideal scheme for him will be putting him in a press bail scheme where he's running a slew of different coverages, whether that be, man or zone. Man where he has the capability of doing it. Same scenario where I think if Marshawn Lattimore is the guy that we expect him to be and is covering wide receiver ones this year, I have no reason why to believe that Trey Amos can't check wide receiver twos around the league, especially sticking Mikey Sanders still in the the nickelback position where a lot of people believe is his rightful home. I think that we can have one of the better DB groups in the league if we select any of these 3 defensive backs that I've mentioned in today's episode. So that'll do it for today's video. Our 5, those are our favorite 5 prospects, our 5 favorite prospects to be selected by the Washington Commanders if we stay at 29. As I said at the beginning of the video, I would love to trade back, but if we don't, we're going to have to pick somebody. And Donovan Ezereku, Mykel Williams, Nick Emanwari, Trey Amos, and Azariah Thomas will be the 5 names that I'll be over there doing the Dougie on Rio Robinson stream on draft night if we select any of those guys at 29. So hopefully you learn more about these prospects. Let me know how you feel about these prospects. Let me know how you would feel if Washington selected any of these prospects. And as always, if you're not following us on social media, what are you doing? Go ahead. First, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Go ahead and follow us on social media at BleedingBNG, BleedingBNG. That's our Instagram handle. Our Twitter handle, our X handle is spelled a little bit different. That was BleedingBNG, BleedingBNG. Follow us on all, podcast platforms. If you're listening to us audio only, leave a ranking. If it's on Spotify, if it's on Apple Podcasts, that's how we finesse these algorithms so that when you're searching anything Washington Commanders, Bleeding BNG is that number one content hub that pops up in your search bar. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something. I hope you laughed. And I hope we went through a slew of emotions because guess what? I'm hyped. And I don't think I'm coming down from this high until we make a pick in less than 2 weeks. The draft is here, baby. The draft is here. I'll check in on you guys on the flip side. Peace.